So, hello and welcome everybody to the latest of our Lunchtime Publisher Book Buzz series. I am so excited you are all here, and this is summer. It's summer reading time. It's officially underway at the library. So I do hope that you have already signed up for summer reading. You can do that at saclibrary.org or at any of your local branches, and you get rewarded for reading. I mean, the best reward of all is reading a good book, but this year you can get a tote bag to carry all your books in, or you can choose a chip clip so you can keep your snacks, an important reading partner, keep them fresh. And this is a very sturdy clip, and it has a magnet on it and everything. So be sure to go online or to your local branch and go ahead and sign up. So, a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please note that this presentation is being recorded. All participants have both their camera and microphones turned off for this event so that we may better focus on the main presenter. The chat is open, as we have seen before we got started, and if you have questions for our presenter or for me, this is the place to ask. If you have any technical difficulties, please message me directly. All participants will be sent a link with a list of titles featured in today's event, and the recording will be posted on the library's YouTube page. So should you miss a title or two, don't worry about it. Also, a randomly selected attendee will win a prize package courtesy of our presenting publisher, Workman, today. Notification will happen via email after the event. And now, on with our event. I would like to welcome Annie Mazes, the Senior Library Marketing Manager of Workman's Adult Titles, who will be sharing some of the best new and upcoming books to read this summer. Please take it away, Annie.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in your book talks. I will be talking about nonfiction and fiction titles that have come out since the fall, so they're pretty new, right up to last week. Workman, I bet that you will know books of ours, even if you don't know that you know they're Workman. So most popularly, the Workman Publishing does a lot of, we do the What to Expect When You're Expecting books. We've done the Brain Quest is a Workman line, and then a whole bunch of amazing novels like Water for Elephants, An American Marriage. So I feel like we do incredible gardening books. If you're fan of gardening, you definitely are familiar with our timber titles. So there's a whole host of things that fall under the Workman Publishing umbrella. So, which is great because we have a hat for every head, a book for every reader, which is one of the laws of library science. And I feel like we really fill that law very well. But before I bore you to death with things like that, I will start talking about titles. So I'm Annie Mazes. You can email me if you have any questions, or find us on our social media channels. But I'm going to jump right into our books, starting with Paper Bullets, which I was a huge fan of. It's history, but it is incredibly well researched, an amazing story of these two little known women. They were incredibly brave artists during World War II, and they were determined to rebel against the Nazis in the only way that they could, through their art. So Lucy Schwab and Suzanne Malherbe are better known today by their artist names of Cloud Calhoun and Marcel Moore. So if you Google their artist names, you'll find all of this very gender-bending art that they created. They sort of developed a cult following in recent times. But back in the 40s, they were living on the Jersey Island in the English Channel, and Nazis invaded their island. And so they planted these paper bullets, wicked insults against Hitler, calls to rebel, subversive fictional dialogue between troops and between civilians, and everything was meant to demoralize the Nazi troops. They were captured and sentenced to death, but they did survive. Obviously, they went on to create more artwork. But this book is fascinating, and it's so well researched. Hampton Sides and Douglas Brinkley are amazing historians who both raved about this book. It was an ALA Stonewall Honor book. So it's perfect for fans of Jewish history, LGBTQ movement, art, political resistance. There's so much in here. So if you're a nonfiction fan, this book has a lot for you. So Storey Publishing, one of our imprints, has been publishing into the how-to space for decades. And this book is an incredible encyclopedia of interests. So, you know, people have been home a lot more in the last year and a half. They've been doing all these, you know, hobbies and developing new interests. Something more than just watching Netflix, which I'm very guilty of doing. And this book is perfect for this because there's dozens of useful and intriguing visual tutorials that cover how to carve a turkey or capture a swarm of bees, predict the weather by the clouds, create a dog agility course, keep a nature sketchbook, on and on and on. So many amazing skills and new interests that you can develop. Perfect for sparking conversations and inspiring new hobbies. Made in China is riveting. In 2012, a woman in Oregon discovered an SOS letter in a package of Halloween decorations that she had purchased in Kmart, and it was written by the prisoner of war who had packaged them in China. And so this is what prompted Amelia Pang to really deep dive into the labor camps that create the home goods that we buy. So this book follows the life of Sun Yi, who was the prisoner who wrote that SOS note. Pang conducted extensive interviews with Sun Yi himself, the people who knew him. She identified and interviewed other people who have endured similar stories. She traveled to China to follow falsified supply chains. She tracked trucks from labor camps to warehouses. She did this all under a civilian visa, not a journalist visa, so she could have much more access. But if she had been caught, it would have been incredibly dangerous. But she did it because she thought it was incredibly important for consumers to really understand where the products that we buy come from. And so this is a real call to action, urging consumers to ask questions and demand answers from companies that they patronize. Misadventure is really amazing and fun. Jess Phoenix is a complete badass. She's a volcanologist, a natural hazards expert. She's the founder of Blueprint Earth. I think she's like 34 or something. She's dedicated her life to scientific exploration, and her career path, which has been really hard fought in the still very dominated male world of science, has shoved her into deep sea submersibles, congressional races, cocktail parties at fancy clubs, and throughout all of this, she really just wants science to be more accessible to everybody. She skillfully blends personal memoir with adventure and scientific exploration in this book, and she talks about her journeys through jungles and glaciers, university classrooms, television studios, and even the side of the world's largest volcano where she fixed a tire with a ballpoint pen, bubble gum, and duct tape, because she's basically MacGyver. But it is a really delightful story, all embarked on for the love of science. Why We Cook is beautiful. It explores a place where food feminism. Lindsay Gardner is an artist, and she brings together stories and essays and kitchen profiles featuring over 100 women restaurateurs, food producers, activists, writers, professional chefs, and home cooks, all of whom are dedicated not only to their craft, but to changing the world of food. So there are profiles on change makers like Cristina Martinez, who is a chef who immigrated from Mexico and brings her Philadelphia community together through food while using her platform to champion immigrants' rights. Leah Penniman describes her day in a life on Soulfire Farm, which she co-founded to combat racism in the food industry. Together, all of these women's voices really reveal the power of food to uplift and nourish and reveal complex questions that affect change. And Lindsay's images throughout are just beautiful. Like you can see this one of Carla Hall. So that the book is just a beautiful package as well. Next up, we have Beeswing. I was not familiar with Richard Thompson before we were publishing this book. Subsequently, I've listened to his music and he's amazing. He is known as one of the top 10, 20 guitarists of all time by Rolling Stone, and he has an amazing following of people. He's known for his brilliant songwriting, his extraordinary writing, and his haunting and lovely songs. This is his first memoir, and he chronicles the start of his legendary career from 1967 to 1975. He matured into this incredibly major musician, establishing the genre of British folk rock with era-defining band Fairport Convention. Then he did that rather quickly to set up a duo act with his wife at the height of the band's popularity. He discovered and embraced Sufism, which profoundly shaped his approach to everything, including his music. So in this memoir, he really recreates the spirit of the 60s as he found and lost his way, then found his way again, and takes us inside his life on the road throughout the United States and the UK, crossing paths with Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, and so many more talented musicians. Bicycling with Butterflies is by outdoor educator and field researcher Sara Dykman. She decided that she wanted to do something that no one's ever done before, pedal along with the monarch butterflies on their over 10,000-mile migration journey. She did it alone on a hand-built bike through 3 countries, Mexico, up through the States to Canada and back again. And in this book, she recounts her incredible journey and the adventures, ups and downs of her ride. She weaves a tale of humility, of grace, all while sharing the science that underlies the urgency of why saving the monarchs is so important. It is a beautifully combined memoir, travel, popular science book. And if you want a really optimistic, energetic, hopeful story, this is a book for you. Every Memory Deserves Respect focuses on EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, a groundbreaking therapy technique for working through trauma. This is a very accessible, helpful guide co-written by a patient and therapist that introduces readers to this technique while educating them on trauma, what it is, what we can learn from it, and how EMDR might be a solution for moving through it. Proof of life. Crazy. It's crazy the lives some people have. So for the past 20 years, Daniel Levin has worked with governments and development institutions worldwide, as well as engaging in diplomacy and mediation efforts in war zones. So when he received a phone call from an acquaintance with an urgent cryptic message to be able to do something about it, over 20 tense days, Levin used his extensive contacts to chase leads through the Middle East, meeting with powerful sheiks, drug lords, sex traffickers in pursuit of truth about what's happened to this young man. In Proof of Life, Levin dives deep into the shadowy world where few have access, an industry of war where everything's for sale, including guns, drugs, and even people. He offers a fascinating study of how people use leverage to get what they want from one another, and where no one does a favor without wanting something in return. This is definitely one of those nonfiction books that reads like fiction and is riveting and not unputdownable. How We Do Family. In 2017, Trystan Reese, who's transgender, and his groundbreaking pregnancy attracted a lot of media fanfare. But prior to that, he and his partner Biff took in Biff's niece and nephew, 1-year-old Haley and 3-year-old Lucas. From this very surprising start, Trystan and Biff built a loving marriage, a very happy home, learning to parent on the job. And in How We Do Family, Trystan shares their unique story and what he's learned about being the best parent and partner and person you can be. Through crisis, adoption, their own pregnancy, all of the very usual challenges of parenthood, Trystan shows that more important than getting things right is doing them with love. This book is cuckoo bananas. It's another one of those books that is just like, how is this a real story that happened to somebody? It's amazing. It's gotten so many starred review trade publications. It is, honestly, I know you're not supposed to pick favorites, but if you read any of the nonfiction books I talked about, Nowhere Girl would be the one to go to. It is wild, it's heart-wrenching, it's unexpectedly funny, it's an inspiring coming-of-age memoir running for freedom against all of the odds. Cheryl Diamond felt like life was a big adventure. You know, she was hurtling down the Himalayas one day, she was mingling with underworld fixers, she was living in Australia the next day, and what she didn't know was that she had been born into a family of outlaws fleeing from the highest international law enforcement agencies. By the time she was in her teens, Diamond had lived dozens of lives and lies, but as she grew, love and trust turned to fear and violence, and her family, the only people she had in her world, the relationship started to unravel. Surviving required her to escape from this, and in doing so, Diamond had to unlearn all of the rules that she grew up with. This is Glass Castle meets Catch Me If You Can, an impossible to believe true story of self-discovery and triumph It's cuckoo bananas and amazing. And Yoke, which just came out yesterday. Jessamyn Stanley is incredible. She's a very charismatic author, Everybody Yoga. And in Yoke, she takes us on a personal and provocative journey into what it means to practice yoga. Everybody Yoga taught how to do yoga. Anybody can do yoga. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a certain to you. But Yoke really tells us why you should do yoga. Yoke draws its name from the literal translation of the Sanskrit root yuj, from which the word yoga derives. So Jessamyn writes about why, what she calls the yoga of the everyday, the yoga that's not just about poses, but applying the hard lessons that you learn on the mat to the even harder daily project of living life. This yoga of the everyday is about finding within life's toughest moments the same flexibility, strength, grounding energy, and core awareness found in a handstand or cobra pose. I don't do yoga, you might be able to tell, which I should. In a series of deeply honest, very funny, gritty, thoughtful, and largely autobiographical essays, Yoke explores issues of self-love, body positivity, race, sex, sexuality, cannabis, and more, all through the lens of this very authentic yoga practice. Now I'm going to flip a little bit and move into our fiction titles. His Only Wife is a wonderful beach read, so it's perfect for summertime. It was a Reese's book club pick. It's gotten crazy, amazing reviews. One of the trade review publications called it Crazy Rich Asians for West Africa. So Afi Tekpel is a young seamstress who lives in a small town in Ghana with her widowed mother. And one day she's offered this life-changing opportunity to marry one of the sons of this incredibly wealthy family. She has seen him throughout her life, but she doesn't really know him, but she accepts because, it's a very hard offer to turn down. She doesn't even meet him until weeks after their wedding because he sends a stand-in to his own wedding. So maybe a first clue that he's not super invested, but he turns out to be a really lovely person. It's just that he also turns out to be in love and in a relationship with another woman who his family doesn't approve of, which is why they wanted him to get married. So Afi really has to discover what it is that she's willing to accept in her life, where she's willing to compromise, where she really does not want to compromise. Ultimately, how that turns out for her. She wants power over her own decisions. But it's a great read. It's a lot of fun, but it also has a very real strong message. And Peace Adzo Medie, this is her debut novel. She's a brilliant scholar and she's a huge advocate for women's rights. And that really is a very strong thread throughout the book. Big Girl, Small Town. Magella O'Neill is the heroine of this adorably delightful, quirky Irish book. If you like Dairy Girls on Netflix, this is a very good read alike. Magella is very happy out of the spotlight. She works in a chip shop. She doesn't really want anything to do with her neighbors. She's grown up in this very small Northern Ireland town, has been very affected by the troubles between the Protestants and the Catholics. But underneath her seemingly ordinary life are the facts that she doesn't know where her father is and that every person in her town has been changed by this lingering divide. So her predictable existence is upended by the death of her grandmother, which happens in the very, very, very beginning. So I'm not spoiling anything, but it really sends her down the road to realize, life can be a lot bigger than what she thought it might be. The Fortunate One by Ed Tarkington, who also wrote Only Love Can Break Your Heart a few years ago, which I thought was fantastic and highly recommend. But in this book, which is also good, Charlie Boykin is young. He's thought his life with a single mother is really just fine. But then one day her connections get him into a very fancy boarding school, and he is given access to the upper echelons of Nashville society. He falls under the spell of what a life among the wealthy can really mean. And he develops this friendship with Arch Cray. And Cray is one of the sons of this very, very elite, fancy, rich family. So they become friends. They stay friends throughout college. Charlie's by his side as he tries to pursue a Senate seat. And he's really pulled into this web of deceit. So this book really questions, why do the poor venerate the rich? Why do we envy and worship a class of people that often have the lowest morals? This is for fans of Ann Patch's Commonwealth. Kevin Wilson's Nothing to See Here is a really well-written story about class and love and loyalty. Got starred reviews from some trade publications calling Tarkington a gifted storyteller. Would be a good book club book. There's lots to talk about. Silence is a Sense. A young woman sits in her apartment in an unnamed English city, absorbed in watching the small dramas of her neighbors. She doesn't really want to become involved in their lives. She's happy to just watch. At the same time, though, she's begun writing a column for a magazine under the pseudonym The Voiceless, trying to explain the refugee experience without sensationalizing it or revealing anything about herself. Gradually, her boundaries start to grow, her world expands, and then there's an anti-Muslim hate crime that shatters the members of a nearby mosque, and she really has to decide whether she wants to become an active participant in her life, in her community, or, in this community that, despite her best efforts, is actually becoming like home to her. Kuwaiti American author Layla AlAmmar incorporates her expertise of Arab women's literature and PTSD into the story of a refugee's very personal experience. Libertie, which I've heard is going to be your September book club pick, is very exciting for anyone who participates in that program, because this book is incredible. Also, beautiful jacket. So Kaitlyn Greenidge wrote We Love You, Charlie Freeman, which I also really enjoyed. All these first novels by our authors who are now writing their second books. Coming of age as a freeborn Black girl in Reconstruction era Brooklyn, Libertie Sampson is very aware that her incredible, purposeful mother, a practicing physician, wants her to follow in her footsteps. Libertie will go to medical school, will practice alongside of her, but Libertie is not interested in science or medicine, and she's much more drawn to the arts. And she feels like there has to be something more than this life that her mother's planned out for her. She's also constantly reminded by the people in her community that, unlike her mother, her skin is too dark for her to pass. So when a young man from Haiti offers her this opportunity of marriage to come to his island where he proclaims that she will be equal, she jumps at this chance, but only to discover that she's still sort of subordinate to him and all men. This book is about her trying to figure out and parse what it actually means for a Black woman to be free. She struggles where she might find it for herself and for generations to come. This is a perfect book club book. You're gonna have so much to talk about, but Kaitlyn's writing is just next level. Hot Stew is the second book from the author of Element, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. This novel tells the story of an unlikely group of individuals in contemporary London. They are all in some way connected to the Soho building, owned by a mysterious millionaire named Agatha, who wants to convert it into fancy shops and condos. But the problem is that the building houses a brothel, and the women who live and work there are not going quietly. The fight over this piece of property draws in the men who visit the brothel, including some far-right group members, a policewoman intent on making London a safer place for all women, a collection of vagabonds who live in the basement. This book is funny, it's smart, it has a fascinating cast of characters, and it deals with a lot of issues that are very big today, questions about property and ownership, inheritance, gender, and power. Folklore. If you're into magical realism and fantasy, this book is for you. Elsa Park is a physicist at the top of her game, stationed at an international observatory in Antarctica, thousands of miles from the ghosts that have haunted her family her entire life. But even the South Pole cannot prevent her childhood imaginary friend from finding her. The reappearance of this ghostly apparition signals that the curse her mother told her afflicted the women of their lives, who are doomed to repeat the narrative lives of their ancestors from the Korean folklore, has finally caught up with Elsa, who has been trying to escape this for her entire life. When tragedy strikes, Elsa needs to return home to the childhood home and cultural lore she rejected in favor of ambition and hard science. She grapples with her splintered family as she seeks long, elusive answers in the pages of her mother's dark folktales. Theater for Dreamers is perfect escapism for the summer. Highly recommend getting this book and reading it somewhere with a beverage in the sun. It's 1960s and the world teeters on the edge of political, cultural, sexual, and artistic revolution. I know it's not pronounced Hydra. I think it's Idra. A community of poets, painters, and musicians revel in dreams. at the feet of their leaders, Charmaine and George Johnston. At the center of the circle of misfit artists are the captivating and inscrutable Axel Jensen, his wife Marianne, and young Canadian ingenue poet Leonard Cohen. So this book is based on this actual group of people, Charmaine Clift, Leonard Cohen, who were this enclave of artists and poets and creative who lived on this island in the 60s. And it's all based on that. And the protagonist, Erica, she's 18, she's fictionalized. She stumbles into this world. She is fresh off the boat from London after the death of her mother. And among this artist, she finds this unraveling utopia with everything being tested, the nature of art, their relationships, her own innocence. It's intoxicating and immersive. Polly Sampson is married to David Gilmour of Pink Floyd, and she has written lyrics for a lot of their songs. And Polly and David produced an audiobook of this, and they created original music for it. So if you are an audiobook reader, recommend this one for sure. But it's just a really fun book. And Legends of the North Cascades will be the last book I talk about today. David had enough. After 3 tours in Iraq, he's come home to Washington. He feels incapable of connecting to the people and the places that wants to find him. Most days, his love for his 7-year-old daughter is the only thing keeping him going. And then one day, tragedy strikes, and David makes a very dramatic decision to take Bella and live in a cave in the wilderness of the North Cascades. This begins a very compelling adventure, a story of a father and a daughter attempting to cope with the breathtaking but harsh environments. Once they're settled in the cave, Bella retreats into a different world, that of a mother and son who had lived in that same space, but thousands of years before. So there's a little bit of a fantastical element to this as she begins to feel and understand what their life was like. So it's a dual narrative of what's happening in modern day and then what's happened between this mother and son thousands of years before. The 2 dramas begin to merge. And it's perfect for readers of Peter Heller's novels or Kristen Hanna's The Great Alone. Jonathan Evison, his writing is very evocative. He wrote West of Here, and this is a very immensely satisfying read. So that is it for me. Any questions you have? Or I'm going to read some comments. See if questions in the comments.
Well, I know Sheila was saying
Cheryl
that,
Diamond.
Yeah. So, and Sheila was saying that
So excited you guys are excited for Nowhere Girl. Yeah, totally. Dairy Girls, perfect comp for that book. His Only Wife, so good. I'm so glad that someone like, that's the beauty of being able to do what I do. I can talk to a whole host of different titles, and there's always something for everyone. So I'm glad you guys are seeing stuff that you like. So that's very cool. But if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, you'll get the list of these books, and they're all available now. So, I know that many of them are probably at the library, but any interest, let me know.
Do you have any one book that's coming up this fall that you'd like to give us a preview of?
Well,
I know there must be a lot to choose from.
There are definitely a few that I am very excited about, but I think the book that is going to be something to really special. So a few years ago, we published a book called Atlas Obscura, and it was all about these fascinating, weird, wonderful, wild places around the world. So if you love travel, it's incredible travel, armchair travel book. So it's also a website, Atlas Obscura. Highly recommend going on and checking it out because, they talk about all these crazy cool places. But they have put together also a website and now a book called Gastro Obscura, and it does the same thing for food. That's going to come out in early October. And it is just like visually epically stunning. And then just all this crazy fascinating stuff. So you learn about like these egg ovens that are thousands of years old that are still in use, and people make fog beer in Chile. Like it's just like crazy weird stuff. They are starting a book club. I've heard that too. But yeah, and visually it's going to be just like a stunning book because the pictures are amazing. So if you like food, if you've missed traveling, it's also a really wonderful exploration of the cultural aspects of food and how it's such a huge part of everybody's culture. So it's just a really lovely way to connect with different kinds of people and learn a lot of cool stuff. So that would be the first title that comes to mind. But yeah.
That book sounds like it was written just for me, honestly.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. But yeah, so I hope that this was helpful. I hope that there's stuff in there that you knew about maybe or didn't know about and discovered. Either way, thank you very much for letting me participate.
Well, thank you. I'm sure that people will definitely have very full bookshelves after all of these presentations. Absolutely. Oh, there was one question in the chat. What was the book about Antarctica again? Folklore.
Folklore's a woman. It's the novel, the magical realism novel where she's haunted, literally.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you again, Annie, and thank you to all of our attendees today. As Annie said, most of these books are on the library catalog right now, and anything that isn't, like Gastro Obscura, will be on there soon. So if you missed any of the titles today, don't worry. We're going to send you a copy of a link of the slides from today's presentation, and we will post a video of this presentation on the library website. And if you missed any of our previous publisher book buzzes, you can find links to their recordings on the Book Buzz event page. Please join us again next week, Wednesday, June 30th at noon, for our final Book Buzz program, a presentation from the library marketing team at Macmillan Books. For information about that event and other summer events, or to sign up for summer reading, because you know you want to do that, please be sure to visit our website at saclibrary.org. So thanks again for coming, and please join us again next week.
Thank you.